Welcome to Small Talk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of Small Talk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Sruly Singer, who is an anical and who published the Sefer Darkei Chaim, which is Biurei Tefillah, V'divrei Musar, which is from Reb Chaim Yaakov Naftali Silberberg of Warsaw, otherwise known as Naftali Viyershuver, if I'm pronouncing it right. Viyershuver, there you go. And also there is some Torah in here, as I mentioned, Ilikutim from the Zayis Ranon, Shal Shuva Zayis Ranon, which is from his grandfather. So we'll be talking about this Sefer. So thank you, Rabbi Sruly, for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what can you tell the listeners about this Sefer?
So the Sefer itself is very interesting. It's a beautiful Sefer, and there's a lot of demand for it. And over the years, as an anical, I had one copy of an older version, not one that we're seeing in front of us, but a really old print. That was hard to come by. Then this was reprinted, and it's a beautiful Sefer. People asked for it. I know my father used to always tell me, Rebbe Orenreich Shlita borrows it from me, and he doesn't return it. He borrowed it again, and again he doesn't return it. Now, whoever he lent it to, he wouldn't give it back. It's like a Geschmacke Sefer. A lot of people from the previous generation, from the Yeshiva Light, are familiar with the, we call him the Zayder Naftali, but for Naftali Viyershuver. And there's a lot of demand, and I decided if it's not out there, my father and I said we'll make some phone calls. It wasn't a big deal. We used the same Sefer that was put out in 2011. Then it was put together nicely, as in the version you see here, and I brought it back to life and reprinted a few hundred copies of it. Baruch Hashem, I have a lot of interest. People, I gave one to Buri Deutsche Law. He was so excited. He said, I'm going to mon you from my missing shachars tomorrow. So, very Geschmacke Sefer.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, this edition that you republished, they did a beautiful job. They made many editions for manuscript. There's extensive notes. There's a lot of things in here which we'll talk about. So I think it's important to start. Let's talk about your Zayda, the Mechaber of this, from Naftali Viyershuver. First of all, when you're looking at the Sharblat that we were talking, and I was like, it's Viyershuver, Varshuver. He was in Varsha. So people get confused. He's Warsaw, it's Viyershuver, but it's Viyershuver. It's not Varshuver.
Yeah, many times I'll tell somebody I'm an anical from Naftali, and they'll say, Naftali Viyershuver. It's Viyershuv. That's where the town where he had his one and only Rabbanus. It was a 6 years, and I'll put into chronological order, but that he got that stellar from his father, and he was the Rav there for 6 years. It's a city somewhere in the Lodz Kalish region, Viyershuv, close to. He then moved to Varsha, and he lived in Warsaw, which is actual Varsha, quite a few miles away from there. And that's where he lived the rest of his life. And he was very, very well known as Naftali Viyershuver, but he lived in Varsha, Twarda Street, which I think is still around that street.
You said his father's were from Binyamin. He was the author of Ali Zayis, which makes sense because the grandfather was the Zayis Ranon.
Right. So really what we call the Avia Mishpacha, so to speak, because I guess that's where we have a lot of information starting from the Zayis Ranon, Moshe Leib Zilberg. Briska Koil's right there on the corner. So it's interesting. He's a mechutin with the Ponim Iris. The Silbergs and the Orbachs were meshadach with each other quite a few times. So those two streets intersected each other. So the Zayis Ranon was a Polish goyin. He went in his later years to Eretz Yisrael, where he lived in David Yellin. I know Rechoiv David. David Yellin, in his house, he had a chutzner over there, and that's where he had his Talmidim, and he said Shurim. He was motor Batal Tefillin his whole life. Very Kodesh Elyon, and we have tshuvas from him, tshuvas Zayis Ranon. He wrote with Rabbi Kiva with the Chedush Yerim, that Kufa, and the rest of his life he lived in Eretz Yisrael. His niftar, I believe, in 1865. That was the Zayis Ranon. His grandson, we're talking about, is the Baal Mechaber, Naftali Viyershuver.
Now, I want to jump in. So the Zayis Ranon, by the way, Zayis Ranon was printed in 2 big volumes. Yes. That has to be redone. Tell the Einik that has to be put back. Just reprint it. They did a great job, and it's out of print for years now.
Beautiful job. Also, somebody what's his name? Pfeffer. Aryeh Pfeffer.
Machon Chacham Shlomo, I think, published that one, right? That's he also did it. So that was done, and it's not in print.
Yeah, and no, it's a beautiful work. When I gave one of my children the name Moshe Udaleib, I said over a nice shtickle from Zayis Ranon, Machloikis, the way he learns Ben Rav Shach, very geschmack. It's a geschmack sefer. It's a harder sefer, but in the new version, it's you just had it they just put out right before Pesach actually, on an old version of Zayis Ranon. They didn't touch it, meaning it's the old Oisius with the Hagoyis of Reb Naftali, of tonight's conversation. His Hagoyis.
Yeah, I posted on the Sharm Chatter WhatsApp chat. There was the Zayis Ranon. It was the Hagoyis Yefei Pre-Toyer. It was the Hagoyis. That it says Hagoyis Yefei Pre-Toyer. So it's the Zayis Ranon with the Hagoyis. I think when I posted, I wrote like Hagoyis Pre-Toyer. I think I got confused. I wasn't looking very much. With so much new stuff coming
this
up.
This name was
Erev
Pesach. I know it's busy.
Erev Pesach. I was so much, and I was just like dumped it out. And I got you was all like, no, it's not even Pre-Toyer. It's Zayis Ranon. I was like, oh my gosh.
So that was interesting project. They didn't do the new print.
They did nothing.
It was, they took the old, maybe it was on a blue part. I actually have a Zayis Ranon that also belonged to the Zaydir Naftali. And they took his Horus. He was very dovuk in his Zaydis Torah, as you see throughout the Sefer. And they took his Horus and they show you the copy and the print.
So that stuff is not inside of this copy of this Sefer?
No, that was in a personal copy that we have a lot of his materials get brought to us for sale in the family members. You see it sometimes on auction. Somebody had this copy and that was reprinted.
Okay, so you mentioned he was the Rav in Viyershuver for 6 years, and then he moved to Varsha. That's where he was the rest of his life. He's buried in Warsaw.
Correct.
What else is there to talk about him the rest of his life and his Svarim? Or this is all we have, so it's Ksavim. What can we talk about?
Right. So it's really it's the personality which really comes out from the Sefer. The Sefer itself, every part of it, and it's broken down to a few different parts, and we'll walk through it. But it really brings out his personality, and it also brings out the time. It's very. You had asked me a question about when we were talking about like who would appreciate the Sefer, and anybody who appreciates that tkufa of pre-war, the Imre Emes tkufa, Menachem Zemba, the Rebbe Chanan, the Beis Brisk, B'Sefartei, that world he lived in, and he was his most active years, which is a tkufa in history that I find very interesting and relate to a lot, because it was I always say the last door of the Rosh Hashivas before the war and the later Rebbes. That door is the most relatable to us. They live in a time, we see videos of it, we see the Chavetz Chaim, they lived in cars, they had phones. Right, Briskrov spoke on a phone when he was in Vilna. It's a life that we could relate to. So I find that's the most relatable part of history. But anyways, those were the years he was active in. He was born in 1850 and he was nifter in 1930 at the age of 80. He lived relatively long life, His Iker Rabbeim was his father, Rebbe Avram Ben Yamin, and he had Rebbe Yaakov Simcha. I don't know how you pronounce his name, Reish Yud Feishin, I believe, who was very close to Rebbe Akiva Eiger, close Talmud Rebbe Akiva Eiger, and he was his primary Rebbe. His father and Rebbe Naftali both were Talmidim of Rebbe Yaakov Simcha, and then he became a Talmud. He went to go to the Beis Halevi. Where exactly? I always try to discover more details where he learned by the Beis Halevi. We know the Beis Halevi spent a lot of time in Varsha. So it might have been after he's about, I don't know. But his Rebbes from there on were the Beis Halevi and Reb Soslanter. And you see it throughout the Akdama. It's a fascinating Akdama. It goes through just so I'll tell you, I'll walk you through the Sefer. It starts off with a Toldus, a beautiful Toldus that was redone in 2011. Just fascinating. He says over here, there's a great story over here. You'll love this. He was in Carlsbad. Every good story is in Carlsbad. He was in Carlsbad, and there was at the time, what was the name of the Yid? Rebbe Avram Menachem Steinberg. Machza Avram was the name of the Sefer. He was there, and Naftali wanted he wanted to be Meshamashim. So he went and he spent a few days spending time with Rav Avram Menachem, and after a day or two, Rebbe Menachem tells this Yid that was helping him out, he told him, I want him Mishamash Tamid Chacham. Please allow me, while I'm here on vacation. He said, sure. He said, listen, Naftali Viyershuver is over here in Carlsbad. I want to go see him. So please, find out where his Achsanya is and take me to go see Naftali. So then he was a little stuck. He's just disappeared, and he didn't come back to be Mishamashim the next day. Sure enough, he found somebody else to take him, and he goes to knock on the door, and he sees the Yid that was being Mishamash me and looking to Mizdam Tamid Chacham in the last couple of days is none other than Reb Naftali. It was just a very, very typical story from, just I pulled out of the Toldos. He went with Meir Dam Platsky, who was his mechutin, his
Klichemda.
The Klichemda had a son-in-law. His son-in-law Yitzchak Yosef Silberberg, who was a grandson of Naftali. So his son was mechutin with the Klichemda. They went together to Eretz Yisrael as the head of Kupas Meir Baal Nes of Koil Poilin. They had a fascinating nest over there when they I don't know if it was still in Europe or somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, but the Akdama brings it was in Odessa, and they were on a train, and somehow their caravan got disconnected from the rest of the train. They found out a couple hours later that the rest of the train derailed. So I'm just a nice moifis, that they had over there. So there's the Toldos, there's the Hagdama and that grandson, the Edom of the Klichemda, is the one who put out the Sefer for the very first time a year after his Patira. In 1931, he was called the Krasa Shel Tzaruv. He put it out for the first time, so we have his Akdama as well. And then it starts with a Pirush on Tefillah, some beautiful, very, very unique pieces. He says, we need a davin, just in Tefillah, he says, we need a davin. It's a beautiful Lashon. Al kol zeh tzrichen l'spal Hashem Yisbarach, u'tzrichen l'zeh tagburas rachmim, va'afilu al hasmoda va'chazoras halimud. Hagam she'ikut toli b'bchira, kol mokim boi tefillah al tyrus halev shenivcher satoiv. Just beautiful, V'davar HaMelech as well. Beautiful pieces in the Pirshat Tefillah. Basically goes through the Tefillah on Ritzei. Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu ba'amcha Yisrael. So we're asking the Rebbeinu Shalom that there should be Rotzi to him, Amcha Yisrael. He says, v'anim shel muvan Kama bushu kliyum la'oishim shezed darkum kesel lama levazes chile godom l'klal Yisrael zeh mevaze b'derech klaus kol b'nei Yisrael hador b'dinas Lita or b'Galicia or b'Freisen in Prussia or kol chasidim b'derech klal or chasidim in Rebbe Zel chasidim in Rebbe Acher v'chein b'hepech kitzar adavar elu mevazim es elu ve'elu mezalzim es elu. And then you were asking the Rebbeinu Shalom Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu ba'amcha Yisrael, who are you fooling? He gives a beautiful mashal, just a lot of nice geschmack zisa Torah, I would say, on Tefillah. That's that part. And then goes Mamori Musar. He was a big Baal Musar. He used to spend, we'll see in the Mechtavim, he writes to somebody that he couldn't answer because he was in Slobodka. He used to go to, or he went at least a few times to Slobodka to spend days of Elul there.
I think we should turn to the Mechtavim. You also have, you mentioned there's various Mamari Musar, where he has Yiras Mea Machloikis, Avos Yisrael, and there's various things there. He has Isavas Chadoshes, there's various editions, where he has, different things. There's a Tzavos edition, but the Mechtavim, I think, is the fun stuff. Mechtavim, letters, when you come to letters, letters is always the funnest stuff.
So there's a lot to his children, and we have a lot of letters. He sent a lot of his letters. They're simply available, and they survived the war because we have a ton of material that he sent to Yitzchak Chaim Sonnenfeld. He wrote to him a lot. I own one of those letters that he sent to Chaim Sonnenfeld. Here's a fascinating. I have a few that I've highlighted and folded pages over time. So here I'll point out one of them where it's on page Reish Hey, Mecht of Tess, where he's writing to the Bendina Ruv. So you know what the Bendina Ruv was? Bendina Ruv was the Svasemis' son-in-law, from Penich from Alexander, and the Bendina Ruv was going to Eretz Yisrael, and he writes to him, Shamati b'shem tzadikim kedoshei elyon, that when you come into Eretz Yisrael, you're in the bechina of a ibur v'yeroyin v'leida michadash, who can katan shenoilid v'tzorich la'amol michadash, and then he writes in parentheses, don't have yish, v'ach gach noislim b'chazar kol medjur gaisa v'yesu says. He says, he's writing to him. This is like his musr slash chizik that he would share. It was just interesting to me that he sent it to him, as hachana going into Eretz Yisrael. There's
By the way, it's worth pointing out at the beginning of that letter. It says, Yedidi Chavivi, my friend, av she'eineni b'shleimos habriyos. I'm not feeling well. V'chol yoyim yisi otzer b'mita leilin. I'm lying in bed. V'lo yacholti lichtav l'maylis k'voy terasi haramok eis achar chatzos alayla. It's late at night after chatzos. B'chol zois otzer b'milim baluchal. I made sure ki matzasi choy v'lanavshi. I think I have to. L'yadil l'maylis k'voy terasi eis utvarim shenochet zadas l'chol ha'olam l'harakodesh. All to go up to harakodesh. He says, I must tell you now.
This is how you do it. This is how you go.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now, that was that. The next one I have over here, just so interesting. He writes, this is really Chekav, in Mechtav Yud. He's writing to a relative. It's his L'choit Choisni Chavivi. It's Auerbach, as I mentioned earlier, that we're Mechatanim with the Auerbachs a lot. So if he writes, he's Hainu me'en yonim an esgavim shoheru lanu rabbeseinu achroina hamuvakim nucham eden. That in Yonim Niskavim, right, of the Rachmain, of the Achroinim, and then he writes like this: Uberoisham Baal Urim V'Tumim Haktsois Achoishin Hagoyin Rikiveigu Nesivas Hamishpat Arba Ragle Markova Satira Hakadoisha. Just a line and a way of talking, which is goes very geschmack with. He writes it's either in the Mamori Musar or it's in the. He was asked by somebody in the family, why don't you spend more time in, I'm going to find it because it's, here, he writes, Mamash in this letter, he writes, Madua, his father asked him, Madua eni maimik yuni amok in Kabbalah, so that there should be more Torahs of Kabbalah out there, and he said, Gamze b'chlal sisrei Torah legalis hamatmonius begemar v'tois rishonim.
By the way, and that's after, where he writes in the letter, he says, Biksovin iskarti she'amar li moriv Rabbi Agoyin amufla tzadik yisoid olam Rabbi Shol Salanter. I remember my Rabbi Shol Salanter told me ki ma shenimtza b'vanesenu Rav Medinas Lita shaloimdim limud chitzaynim and Lita they limud chitzaynim a lot of maskilim in Lita echen me'agarmim lezeh ki yesh kama. He says there's many. And he says Hagam shenimtza b'yeshivas bachrim muflam mula b'Torah v'yirav many good bachrim shaloimdim aisai ezu meas dafin gemara. They learn hundreds of dafin gemara imat toisvis ve'enim yoidim rak mashakasu toisvim toimar v'yishloimar toimar v'yishloimar. This should be tois. Yeah. Aval enim yoidim amasikus. They don't know the sweetness masvaru behakushyo machitshu be'atoisis. What did toisis hold in his question and what was he machadish? Ve'enim margishim. And they don't realize afilu tipa me'ayam mechachmas umesikus hatoisvis in the depth and the sweetness of toisis. Ulahavdil alfe havdalas bachitzainim. Ma'ata chachma sheyesh b'm, the small chachma that's there. Who mefresh bailet umargishim zois taken from miyad kebehem ein shum nestaris. He says therefore lachein ratza oz lachzikeni bevilna lumen b'ayfen kazeim kol b'nei yeshivas the sham is yushayis b'm every day. V'ani b'shami zois nosati misham taken from miyad b'chashvish ein kedalas that's not kedai. V'aderech she'amra adoni avi zikni zia ala pasuk. On Hashem ki ani avdecha shekasav ois hey, right? So it says, and in the footnotes, the stomach kavana shekasav ona be'hey v'loy ona be'alef. So it says ona be'hem in kan mokum ke'es ani mescharat al zeh in the charat. Anyways, he goes back. It's fascinating. That is where you get
that's
a
stellar
feeling of a
turn
letter.
down, huh?
Yeah, first of all that, but also you see that he's writing this letter, telling you from his Rebbe Yishol Salanter said, and he's talking about the situation in Lithuania, what his opinion is. It's fascinating to see there's just one little piece in a letter.
It's unbelievable how he was so busy with the Oimek HaTorah, of the Arba Ragli Markova, of the Tumim and the Ktsois and the Sivis. He was Kol Kula Orangutan in the Shivish Masechta, so to speak. But he was so Chassidish and so in that way, he was Dovuk and Tzadikim. He writes at the end of a letter, I'm just skipping around, or maybe it's that letter. V'gamini maskirch, I'm reminding you, Shetasik Harbe Bebir Hagro, Ki Hu Ma'ora Einayim. He refers to it a lot of times in the letters. He writes to the Eneklach, or to the children, to be focused on Limudei Hagra. And it's almost as it's like something schooly, that it's, Chassidish Sfarim have it as a school, you learn Kedushas Levi whether you understand it or not. He had that in you with the Gra. Very, very interesting. In Yud Beis, he talks about Machloikas Reb Yaakov Emden.
Yeah.
You see that? Isn't that fascinating?
Yonason, he calls him Yonason Miprago. He was, but he calls him. Yeah, and he says Harbe Gedolim Naflu Betois Beshkaga V'Chashos Kodesh B'Divri Nevala, and he goes through the whole thing. Chalila V'Chaz Shalom L'Daber V'Lachshav V'Lagoyna Nera Kodesh Elyon Harebi Rabbi Yonason Zia makes him with the Chassidish Rebbe. B'Mash Shechash V'Achirim.
The Rabbi Yonason.
Yeah, he calls him. Go on.
But then he writes Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Fascinating. Did you see the dogma?
By the way, I want to end even before that. He says, "Gam yo atzti." I gave an eitzah as kvoid choisen hagoyin zatzal, which they're talking about Meir Don Plotsky, the klichemda. Lechaber kuntres al Indian zet. To write a kuntres. Ki yadati yishesh yidir rechava b'Indian has esik b'yesh. He knows about it. Esik b'yesh. V'yodea ha'emes ad kama tzadik im oisik kadosh elyin yinakim mechov mikol v'choshti oisik al chinam v'yevtiach li ach lo also b'yada. He wasn't able to do it. I told him to write a sefer. V'chol mahar achrov k'mahar achra shchina. This is how he ends off. Zekenach is writing to his grandson. So, yeah, some really fun letters in here.
What else? There's the next one here. They put him in jail for a couple hours because they thought his passport was fake, and he writes, "These are the things that I was mahar while I was in jail," and he gives 10 pirushim in Hoidu that we say on Erev Shabbos. But this is I love this. Look at your Dalit. He's writing to my Zayd, the Pittsburgh Ram Binyamin, and he writes. He's going off to America to collect for the Mesifta in Viyershuver's known Makom Torah with the Klichemda and the Silbergs. They all had the Miriamis had a big yard in it, and he was going to raise money. And there's fascinating stories from his fundraising trips to America. My Zayd Pittsburgh. Well, that's another topic. And he writes over here, Naftali sends to his grandson, "Hagam shebefrat echod yesh America Milo." Lasha Shanis Yashva Mikoriv was more recently populated. Alderch Shamatzinu Besoira Akdoisha Imolta Nashama by Sedaim, Uberashi Sham Shanis Yashva Shana Achas Meocher. It was settled a year later. Va'avainise Mo'otim had a year less of sins. So he's comparing America to Europe at the time. This is in Tafresh Peitas in 29. Va'America Nis Yashva Harbimeis Shana Meocher Mi Europa. So therefore, it has less chait. Can you imagine? Everybody was saying, "Run away from the treif of America." He found a prat echot sheyesh l'America Maila. That was that's the Mechtavim.
There's a couple of letters about Kameis. I mean, there's a nice number of letters in here to all, like I said, Chaim Sonnenfeld. He has a lot to the who's who of that kufa. So if you're interested in seeing, who he was writing to and who he was talking to, and you can see the letters that they're talking with each other. But also the things that he's saying, the things that he's saying over from his Rebbeim and what he heard. And letters are always fascinating. So there is around 50 letters, I think 47 letters.
Yeah.
So there's a nice amount of letters that he has in here. And then there's a little bit from his son, right? There's a little bit of Torah from his son in here.
Yeah, and there's Drushim from the Zayis Ranon.
Yeah, there's Drushim v'Chedusha Torah from the Zayis Ranon that they're malakim to the Zayis Ranon, which is not available. So there's a nice amount of Torah, and this sefer is almost 400 pages. So nice. Again, there's footnotes in here. There's a lot of fascinating things. A very unique sefer together with the whole bio in the beginning. So I think we highlight a lot of different things for the sefer. I think you mentioned earlier that I'd asked this to you, but I guess I'll ask it here towards the end of the episode: is who is this sefer meant for?
I think somebody who appreciates the Bali Musar, appreciates Musar, somebody it's funny, he wasn't really considered Hasidic Yid, but just the way, it's just the Messias, and that was his style. And if you could appreciate a Varme Hasidic Yid that had that Hislavas, that had that brand, but he also had that Talmud of the Beis Halevi that wouldn't eat matzah, he wouldn't eat more than a kazayas without having the Beis Halevi's matzah, that Vekas and Yisrael Salanter, and in his age, running off from Varsha to go spend the El in Slobodka, that is that type of person that the real Isha Kolboy, and Rabbi Chanan refers to him in Kovetz Aris as going at Tzaddik, so he explains what the story behind it, and there's just a yid a yid and a sefer that people just find very geschmack.
Okay, so you reprinted this. It should be available by the time of this airing. Hopefully, it'll be in Bigelizen, Judaica Plaza, Zolda Berman, some other stores. We'll find somewhere online, one of these farm stores. We'll put a link in the show notes where those interested can purchase it online. And hopefully one day the Mishpacha will print the Zayis Rana. That's the next thing.
Hashem. There's a lot. I actually have a different project that's really my next in line. So the person who put this out from the Ksav Yad, was his Aina called the Krasen Shel Tzaruf. His Sefer, Yitzchak Yosef Solberg, he was the Pittsburgh's brother, and he has a Sefer Vayan Yosef. He has some other Sefer, not Alei Zayis or Aleyu Zayis, some nice farm. He was very interesting. He was a Mechutin with Reb Hersh Glickson. And very fascinating. Right before the war, a few weeks before the war, Reb Hersh Glickson's son, Reb Shai Glickson, who was Reb Chaim's favorite Einokol, got married to the Krasa Shel Tzaruf's daughter, the Klichemda Zainakol, and also Naftali Zainakol. And I want to put his farm out. He has some nice farm al Torah. I think this is Bereishis Shmois. But yes, the Zayis Ranan is easier. It's easier. It's just has to get done. It was done a beautiful job and just has to be reprinted.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Sruly, for joining me.
Thank
to
you for
discuss,
having me.
Darkei Chaim.
Thank you.